And item 11 is the first response of Auckland Transport to the recommendations of the Governance Framework Review. Thank you very much to the officers we had in front of us, and if I could invite Edward here and Jonathan from Auckland Transport to speak to this paper. And Linda Taylor, sorry Linda, that's right. Overlooking you there.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. So yes, I've got Jonathan Anion with me from Auckland Transport. He's the Manager of Elected Member Relations at Auckland Transport, and Linda is the Program Manager for the Governance Framework Review. I'll take the report largely as read, but just draw your attention to a couple of things. Just as a reminder, the Governance Framework Review began in 2016 to assess whether the Auckland Council governance model was working optimally, particularly in relation to the role of local boards. In September 2017, you as the governing body considered a number of recommendations of a political working party to assess those conclusions of the review, and made a number of resolutions about the role of Auckland Transport and its role in place shaping and local board engagement. The Auckland Transport Board on the 5th of February this year considered those resolutions and endorsed a range of responses which are set out in the long table under paragraph 12 that you can see. Staff consider that those responses are a good initial first step by Auckland Transport, but this is a long game in terms of improving Auckland Transport's engagement with local boards. And so what we propose is that Auckland Transport comes back to you in September when they're reporting on their fourth quarter results, once there's been more substantial progress on the actions. And in particular, in paragraph 15, there's a couple of examples of the kind of things you can expect them to report back on, such as confirmation that local board engagement plans exist for all the local boards, and examples of significant engagements with local boards on specific projects. So I'll leave that there, and we can answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got recommendations set out there, A, B and C. I'll move those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Clow. And any questions, first of all, to officials? I think it's a good report, shows some real progress. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Thank you for the report. I just want to know, in terms of J and M, under paragraph 12, who makes the decisions on those projects?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. These are projects initiated by Auckland Transport, so Auckland Transport...
So if I could ask another question, please. So how does that acknowledge the role of local boards as governors if they aren't initiating these projects? Auckland Transport are.
I think the response is about Auckland Transport consulting with local boards at an early stage in project development to ensure that local knowledge and local place-shaping aspirations are actually taken into account in the project formulation.
Okay, so local boards are just a first point of call in a list of stakeholders that are being consulted?
I think the point is that we are talking to local boards right at the beginning of the process, okay, which is obviously part of the project formulation process. Right. So, no, I don't think they are just stakeholders at all.
Thank you. I think
okay,
otherwise...
next question. You've finished, Councillor Bartley?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I understand that this report is about the relationship between Auckland Transport and local boards. And while my question is not directly going to that, but what about the relationship between Auckland Transport and the community as it goes to projects? Is there some mechanism for reporting around how Auckland Transport is performing there?
We obviously report in a whole wide range of ways about what we're doing with projects, both to local boards and to the governing body. And obviously that information is all publicly available. I mean, we don't specifically go back to the community in quite the way I think you're suggesting, but we certainly report back on all the work we do. Does that answer your question?
Okay, Councillor Kathy Casey.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. I'm interested in R, which has been one of my things. And if you implemented it immediately, what should I be seeing? Because I'm not seeing anything changing. What should I be seeing? What have you done that's different to...
I think, I mean, Auckland Transport always tries to ensure that all elected members have appropriate information. And I guess part of it is wanting to know what you think you want that you aren't getting.
Have we not made ourselves clear on that yet?
Well, I mean, the problem is that Auckland Transport produces a vast amount of information, and we make decisions about what we think needs to go to elected members for their information. I mean, if we sent you everything that we generate, you would have stacks of paper meters high. So we make decisions about that. So if there are particular issues, things that you are not getting that you wish you were getting, please let us know and we'll send them to you.
I'm sorry, maybe we're on different channels here. It wasn't about stuff coming through the emails, which we get masses of. It was actually a one-on-one with somebody from the ward to let us know what the issues are. A briefing on, like, you know how the Auckland Transport through the chair turns up at board meetings and there's a report goes to the board and the Auckland Transport person answers questions about the report you do for Albert Eden. Whereas councillors, the ward councillor doesn't get that. It's almost by osmosis. You learn about things if you happen to catch the agenda of the local board. But at the same time, we get complaints directly from the community about Auckland Transport projects. So there's a disconnect between the good relationship that you have with the board and the ward councillor who's kind of floating around, mopping up.
Councillor Casey, can I... Sorry to interrupt you.
It's that relationship.
Just direct you to Resolution R on page 27 that directs Auckland Transport to actively engage with governing body members, ward
that's
councillors
exactly
on
what I'm
transport
talking about.
projects and issues within their ward.
What should I be seeing? Because I haven't seen anything different.
Yeah.
Nothing's happened.
Well,
I was expecting somebody to introduce themselves as the new conduit between the ward councillor and Auckland Transport. That's what I was expecting. Maybe
so perhaps the question, Jonathan, that's down for immediate implementation, and there has been concern expressed around the table that sometimes the boards get the information but not the ward councillor. Are you able to give us any insight into the change in process that you might follow in order to implement this resolution R?
Sure. So one of the things we'll start doing immediately is we'll start making sure that you have the local board reports sent to you. Obviously, they are all available on the website, but we will send them to you directly so that you have the information that's going in front of the local board, you have the updates on the projects in the area, and they're in front of you. So I've undertaken that we'll do that immediately. I mean, that was part of this. But we also have an update after the AT board meetings each month, which we send to all elected members.
No.
So I think the message is that if it doesn't happen, you'll be hearing from ward councillors, Jonathan.
That's
okay, Councillor Hills.
Yes, I have. Okay, well, they're comments, so if anyone has questions first, I'll speak after.
Yep, okay, we'll hold you over. Councillor Cooper.
Same with me.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Your Worship, through you. Is there a way to possibly vote separately on A, B and C, or...? Because I'm just signalling I won't be supporting A. I don't know how that works.
So I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment. The question was directed to me.
You can separate.
Yeah, can I get you to repeat it, please?
Is there a way to vote separately? I mean, split A, B and C up?
We can take items separately if it is requested by any councillor. So I'll accept that as a request.
Thank you.
Right, we have Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thank you, Your Worship. Team, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge Linda and Jonathan for the work they did on the governance framework review. And this is a journey, if you like, and much as I dislike that word, but it's about migrating from one place where we've been and things haven't been as good as we would like to a place that is better. And that journey is often different for different people, whether you're a councillor or a local board member. And my question, Jonathan, to you is, after you've had some time to digest the findings and the approval of the Governance Framework Review, both by the review panel itself and by this governing body, have you come across, developed a formula inside Auckland Transport to deliver these outcomes, or is it a more iterative, flexible approach?
I don't like the word formula, but I mean, obviously we have a thrust to ensure that everybody, all elected members, have the information that they require to make decisions around what we do. And obviously there will be different things put in place for different people within that spectrum. So I guess it's probably more of an iterative approach, but nevertheless the overall thrust is to ensure that everyone has the appropriate information.
So enhancing engagement, Mr. Mayor, I think that's the important part, and a better understanding of that local knowledge is important. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that really came out of that framework review, particularly to do with transport, was that we have gained a lot of efficiencies in operations and in CapEx by this big Auckland Council. You know, 30 million a year in operations alone of savings, which is pretty outstanding work. But sometimes we've lost a bit of the local, and that's where I think some of the local boards have felt a bit of frustration. And it's good to see that Auckland Transport has recognised that, and there's a willingness to go down that pathway of trying to bring a bit of the local knowledge, the local understanding, and the local passion back into the work that they're trying to do. And you're not going to expect to snap your fingers for it to happen overnight. But I believe, and I think, Jonathan, you'd agree with me, that there is a determination, and we heard it from Lester Levy, as chairman of the board, to make this happen. So I think we have a tick at the highest level of Auckland Transport on that, and now it's just, okay, let's work down that pathway to achieve the better outcome. And if we have to give it a nudge and a prod or a change from time to time, let's do that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, Jonathan, just with respect to the Auckland Transport's response to the resolutions, just looking at in paragraph 12J, it says, ensure that all projects initiated by AT consult with the relevant local board at the project concept formulation stage to ensure local knowledge and local place-making aspirations are factored into project design. So just to clarify, if a local board says that, say, said project is not fit for purpose and Auckland Transport doesn't agree, the default under that scenario would be that Auckland Transport could just proceed as a road controlling authority if it sees fit?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
However, I mean, the intent of the response is that Auckland Transport would, you know, I mean, there are practical
I understand the quandary.
Yeah. In the end, the operational delivery is something that is placed within the responsibility of Auckland Transport. Those who drew up the legislation determined that. What we're trying to do here is get a good process so that we are fully aware and have input into that decision before it's delivered. But in the end, the decision, as I think you're aware, Councillor, remains with Auckland Transport.
I'd like to make a comment briefly.
Yep, sure. We're coming now to comments, if we've exhausted the questions. So
One more question.
Yeah. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you. Jonathan, my question is just around, within the scope of this report and that framework, was the doubling of the CapEx budgets for local boards part of this exercise, or was it separate? And if it was part of this exercise, what's the update in terms of...
So yes, it was, and Liv Taylor and myself have actually been out to see virtually all local boards. I think we've got Rodney as the last one this afternoon, and we have taken a discussion paper to them looking at both the level of increase of that fund and the method of distribution. And a report will go to all local boards for their April meetings, and that report will ask for their formal feedback on both the amount of increase and the method of allocation, and that information will then be fed into the LTP process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I could just speak to that as well. I think it's really important to differentiate in terms of this conversation about governance that, as you pointed out correctly, Mr Mayor, that Auckland Council has decision-making rights over the vast majority of projects, but when it comes to that local transport capital fund, that's very much in the space of local boards as governors, and it's their decision to make on those projects. And the intention is to increase that fund.
And resolutions P and Q relate to that in terms of the local transport capital fund. Yep. Okay, we're now coming to comments. So I've got first on the list, Councillor Hills.
Yes, so just before I comment, just one question. So what is have you looked, or will it be reported back on the Transport Capital Fund, how much has been unspent? Because I have looked at a couple of local boards who have, well over $1 million unallocated and no planned projects. So will there be a way to look at how that is shared out between maybe other boards who are doing a lot of projects and some who are not, or will it just go to everyone and just...
At the moment, there has been no request for us to do that. If the governing body wanted to make such a request, we would obviously furnish that information.
Okay. I think that would be good if that information came to us, because if we're doubling something that at the time can't be completed for everyone, then... Mm-hmm. So my comments in general are where this came from. So all these points under Auckland Transport were agreed to after a long process with governing body members and local board members are part of the governance framework review. So these are the exact resolutions that came from the group, all of us. So it was agreed, that subset of councillors and local board members, that we agreed to that. So that's where that came from, which was a lot of work and a lot of to and froing and discussion. So thank you for that. The other thing is, and I don't like naming staff members, but I will name Marilyn Nichols, who's been our elected member liaison when I was on the local board and now as a councillor. To me, she is probably stepping outside what she is requested to do, but I do feel for Councillor Casey, because Marilyn has been fantastic throughout my whole local government career on keeping us up to date on every issue, and she still treats Councillor Darby and myself the same as if I was on the local board. So we're updated on everything from a yellow line to a large project. So obviously that's difficult. Some of the operational stuff and renewals we don't get, but new things we're always told about, and I just have let Marilyn know if I don't email back, it means I don't have an opinion or don't want to, but she does take our feedback. So if that could be best practice for councillors, I know that governing body members do not get the same information as local boards, because I've experienced both, but I've found my experience has been really positive all the time, and I feel very across all of the issues, and when I was on the local board as well. And I think there should be a way for that person, so Marilyn Nichols will meet with us on request, for a coffee in the morning, and she'll go through the report and any other issues. So for someone like Councillor Casey and other councillors who want that, I think that should be available to all. Maybe it's bi-monthly or something, an update, but it makes it very difficult for us if we don't have the same information coming across the local board. So that's, I know it's in there, but I think in practice, it definitely, I just assumed it was like that for everyone, and through this process I've known there's varying levels in it, and that's fine. Of course that it's great that local boards are involved and councillors are involved, but we have to remember that if a regional strategy is in place that has been consulted on, say it's cycleways, say it's a transit lanes, so we had a regional policy around extending hours of transit lanes recently, and the local board were opposed to that and wanted to stop that. But to Councillor Bartley's point, a local board might not want something, but if it's a regional strategy around safety, around public transport, around those things have to be done whether the local board or the councillors like it or not. So if it's policy based and it's safety based, there was often times on the local board where we would ask for something and not quite get it, but there was very good reasons why, and even if we didn't agree, I could go, okay, that's fine. But the placemaking components are crucial for the local board to be involved in, and especially the Transport Capital Fund, when you're looking at local boards having a say. But I think it's also crucial when we're talking about projects that in the end it's Auckland Transport to make the decision based on the policy that we've all agreed to, the Auckland plan or the local board plan focuses. So I think it's really great. I've always had a really good experience with Auckland Transport as an elected member, and it's been interesting learning the other experiences of others. I just wish that everyone had the same experience as me on the to and fro, on the agreeing and also finding out the information. So I think this is a great step forward, but I'd like to see this for every local board and every councillor, because I think it's possible to do it because I've seen it in practice and I've always had, very good communication. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. That's the importance of not just having the process in place, but a good relationship between councillors and liaison officers. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And I think, I suppose, adding and supporting Councillor Hills' comments, I think it's been up to now pretty ad hoc. If you really have to drive your own relationship with your elected member liaison person, and if you, last term it was easier, but now we've changed the times of the local board meetings, unfortunately, to earlier in the day where, we as our local councillors can't get there half the time, or we have to, excuse ourselves from our prime responsibilities here, unfortunately, so it's not very conducive to helping that relationship. But when we do get to go, we see the elected member liaison staff there every month at council meeting, at local board meetings, and I know it's frustrating for local board meetings members sometimes. I feel they don't have a lot of say, but believe me, how lucky they are to have someone at a meeting every month. But I think for us, and Councillor Hulse may want to comment yourself, but we've noticed over time, and we said this to the new CEO yesterday because we were lucky enough to grab some time with him, that we felt a bit of the humanness had gone out of AT, and we can understand that because there's been huge projects and very engineering focused. We really welcome the fact that now a bit more of a human face will present itself to elected members, and that's not pejorative. Everybody there really tries hard, but they've got a mission. They've got a mission of huge projects to deliver. But for me, we've been lucky with our elected member liaison, and I'm going to name her because you have Councillor Hills, Awena Schuster. But we spend often our Fridays in our constituency meeting with her, so that we can get updates. We have had some shortfalls around the big projects because we feel some big regional projects, especially on our main arterials, it's been really missing for us, not being in there at the beginning and talking about the community interface. And now we've had the ability, because of some learnings that we've had on Te Atatū Road, to actually now let's develop good community relations before we start projects and we start developing them. So we hope that this, especially that are in there talking about elected members, really concentrates also on councillors, where we can add some of that knowledge along with the local board to help design projects so they really do not impact communities so much, because people do want the improvements, but they don't want massive disruption without having a say first and understanding the impact on them. So I think AT have learnt a lot around this, and I think that we can really support AT as community-facing people in the project. So I'm really welcoming this. I think that this will go a long way, but I do have a concern that there's no mechanism, because we've had to drive our own mechanism in the past to actually talk to councillors, because just coming here at a planning meeting often isn't enough at a local level for us. The reality is we're elected locally and we get the flack locally, so we'd like to be included. So yeah, but there's some really good stuff in here, but just wanting to make sure that we've got some mechanism that is reaching out to us rather than us having to drive it constantly. That would be helpful. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, just a quick comment from me. I guess the reason why I asked that question, and just to confirm, is that in my view sometimes local boards are right and the Road Controlling Authority, Auckland Transport, won't always be right, even though I absolutely respect the experience and qualification of traffic planners and engineers. But when a project does go wrong, and I can think of a couple of projects that were planned and delivered in my ward, rerouting of bus services out, away from the Great South Road in Manirewa, and issues with the cycleway on the Great South Road in Takanini. When it is subsequently determined that yes, a mistake was made and those projects could have been done better and that changes will need to be made, I don't think the default should necessarily be, well, look, if the local board wants that to be fixed, the local board's got to stump up and fund that, because ultimately the project is delivered by Auckland Transport as the road controlling authority. It has to wear the responsibility for the capital cost and any subsequent operating costs for changes that have to be made. I'm prepared to support the resolutions, Chair, but in talking about the role of local boards, the word factored, I raise the point because that is ultimately it's not the local board that carries responsibility for the project, but when the project goes wrong, it needs to be Auckland Transport that ultimately is responsible, that makes good in ensuring that a subsequent amendment to the network or project, what have you, that has to be funded and delivered, that is Auckland Transport's responsibility, and the burden of cost shouldn't necessarily fall back on the local board.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also going to jump on the bandwagon and mention our liaison officers, only because since the beginning of this Auckland Council, the relationship that myself and now Councillor Collins has had with them has been excellent. There is and that's Kenneth Tuai for Otara Papatoetoe and Ben Stallworthy for Mangere Otahu. But there is also another name, and Councillor Hulse mentions this name, and I support it every time she mentions. That's Wally Thomas. He has been the contact person for me, Jonathan, and the relationship is working really well. Your Worship, 2 days ago we had the regional stakeholders around the long-term plan, Auckland plan, and other issues. Now, yes, it was confidential, so I'm not going to mention who they were, but there were some comments made around a relationship with Auckland Transport by the group that were here. And so for me, my comment around this particular agenda item is hopefully our local boards, and they mentioned they had very good relationships with their respective local boards, but I think there needs to be some work with our local boards around, and in particular under M, and that's around a relationship with the group that came to us 2 days ago, because they're the ones who were talking to us around issues they had with transport, but they are actually key in regards to the local board areas. So, you know, for me, I just think further from that, and I'll let you know what was said 2 days ago, just so you know. I just didn't want to mention who they were, so then, you know, things could steamroll from there. So, Your Worship, good piece of work. It really is. We'll support it. And again, just the plea that Councillor Hills made is around relationship building. That is key to what's happening with both Councillor Collins and I. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And, you know, what we're trying to do is get the processes right, but what I'm hearing from around the table is that where the relationships are working, they are working. Yep. And there may be some where they're not, and we might need to address that as a practical outcome. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to also mention Ben Stallworthy. He's been very good. He's always kept Councillor Quacks and I pretty well updated. But I think sometimes the local boards and the locals and the local councillors know their patch maybe sometimes better than some of the Auckland Transport planners. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago I had one of the Auckland Transport consultants spent a couple of hours with me driving around parts of the Howick, Pakuranga and Botany ward, looking at one of the things that I think a lot of us have got concerns is, and that's the bus stops. And in fact, the consultant that was with me, I'm not mentioning any names or anything like that, but as we drove around, and I pointed out one of the bus stops, which is on the corner of Cascades and Botany Road, right near a motel, which particularly dangerous spot. He actually commented at, oh, I hadn't realised that had gone in there, and I thought, well, that, and it's still there, and I said it's actually, it's something that I can see an accident coming, and it's something that the local boards and the councillors and the community have commented on. So we really need a little bit of action there, you know. So it's good that we're having this conversation, but some of the placements of some of these bus stops, that there's just far too many, and some streets and roads and whatever. It just seems you just walk just a 400 metres and you're at another bus stop and then another 400. And I know people are wanting to get people on buses, but it's actually holding up the traffic in Pakuranga Road with the bus stop stopping. You know, it's just an absolute nightmare. So I think sometimes local boards and local councillors and the residents sometimes may know better than a consultant that might live the other side of the city. So anyway, thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone who's been involved in this process in the Governance Framework Review. I think it's an excellent presentation that you've made today. I'd like to hone in on Resolution PQ in particular. That's with this Local Transport Capital Fund. I just see that as a very... I'm very pleased with the update you just gave me a little bit earlier, Jonathan, around that question there, because look, I fully endorse that work that you're doing with the local boards to try and up their capital funds, because that's a real message of empowerment down to the local boards that they're seeking, and further than that, and probably more importantly again, is it's actually an empowerment of our communities that are wanting to see the local place shaping projects get done, and this will give the ability to achieve that. So I think it's a strong step in the positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And lastly, Councillor Josephine Bartley.
Thank you, Mr Chair, Your Worship, and through you. For me, it's not about engagement, because since everybody else is mentioning their elected member liaison, Melanie Dale does an awesome job for our local board and also for me as ward councillor. So it's not about engagement, it's not about the elected member liaison person. For me, it's about what is this co-governance really about? And it's coming through with this particular item, because from my days on the local board had to pass resolutions in business meetings to get its direction or voice through to some of the Auckland Transport projects. And to me, that means you're on the outside, because you're having to advocate this way to get your say in something that's happening in your area. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of this particular item. So I just wanted to put that there and put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and for all the councillors that have spoken. I just want to say a couple of things very briefly. Endorsement of Auckland Transport's initial response doesn't mean to say that we are endorsing the delivery on it. We haven't seen the delivery of it. What we're doing is endorsing the fact that the board has agreed to our recommendations and has signalled their intention to implement it. And as the old saying goes, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating. We want to now sit back and say, okay, we've got this agreement, that's what we wanted, but now we want to see the delivery. But I think what's been very constructive about this is to actually get some feedback from a whole variety of councillors that the relationship actually works pretty well. We've got people on both ends of it that wish to communicate. I want to make one other statement, and that's about democracy. You know, democracy isn't as straightforward and quote-unquote efficient as a decision-making process where the engineers and the experts simply say this is what's needed and we're going to go ahead and do it. But that also isn't actually always very efficient, because the experts and the technical people don't always know what the people of a community want. Auckland Transport can't always give people exactly what they want, but it would be hugely unwise not to listen to local knowledge and local needs as part of that decision-making process. That is what democracy is about. Slower, more time-consuming, but in the end, because of the inherent benefits of a democratic system, you actually often get a better response. And so what we don't want to see is a bureaucratic response. No, we're the technical experts, we know best. We want a listening response. We want communication from both sides. And sometimes the community will say, okay, we didn't want that, but now you've given the explanation. We understand why that is what you were proposing to deliver. So it's about communication. Anyway, let's put these motions. I'll put them one at a time as requested. Put to Resolution A. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
Carried. Do two people want their voices recorded against that? Councillor Collins, Councillor Bartley. Against. Resolution B. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. Resolution C. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. And carried. Thank you very much. That was a good discussion. We now